Hey, everybody. Welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Bob Wick.
And we are live streaming.
Ooh.
So,
Ooh.
our topic for this episode that we're going to start with is going to be scene mapping. But before we get to that, we just want to make some housekeeping announcements because Bob and I, since April or May, starting to record these episodes and everything, have slowly but surely figured out a schedule that works for us in recording episodes and also releasing. And we actually have a lot going on. So I think we're going to steady out over the next couple months through the end of the year, hopefully. But now that we're doing that, we just want to lay out what our schedule is going to be for people to more easily follow the content.
Because for those who haven't been guests on our show, there was a point where someone would come on and like, yeah, this will be up in 6 weeks because we're that far ahead.
Yeah, and then we got too far ahead and we released a streak of I think it was like 16 or 17 episodes in a row.
Yeah.
Every day for 17 days just to get reasonably caught up with ourselves.
Right.
Okay, so here's what the game plan is going to be. Right now, we are intending to record live every Sunday at 1 p.m. We might do that with a guest. We might do anything from a normal topic-based episode with a guest. We might do a topic-based episode with just me and Bob. And we might do a show and tell episode. Typically, if it's just going to be me and Bob, we will lead with a topic and just to get the conversation started. And as people join the live stream, we will invite and encourage anyone watching to chime in with questions, whether it be on the topic that we start with or anything else in the improv world, and just go from there. So that being said, once we start talking about scene mapping, feel free to chime in with questions and comments on the Facebook and YouTube threads. And then also, once we feel like we've had our fill of talking about scene mapping, we'll also answer any other questions you have about improv that might be on
absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that we didn't have to. The questions didn't have to be on a topic of whatever we started with, because the whole premise of the show is a conversation at the bar, and those don't keep on track the entire time. That's part of the fun.
Yeah. And we're live, so we'd rather have engagement and focus on that. So don't feel like you're derailing the conversation by asking an off-topic question. Okay, the other thing is that we have a pretty cool announcement. I've taken a long hiatus from doing the lecture episodes, which are just me stand and deliver on to a camera vlog style. You can find those on our YouTube channel if you haven't seen them. And I think the last one I did was released in April, and then we launched the At Length series. But I just recently recorded 10 new episodes for the lecture series, and we're going to start releasing those soon. I can't give you the exact date right now because, again, we're just trying to steady things out. But the releases will come soon. What I can tell you is that tomorrow, if you are an Instagram person over Facebook or anything else, tomorrow, Monday, the IGTV will have all on the Improv FAQ account. Will have all of the lecture episodes that have been released so far. So if you're interested in checking out the lecture style episodes on Instagram, all that content will be available starting tomorrow. Everything that's been released so far, and I think it's like 17 episodes. So it's a decent chunk of episodes.
Yeah, a lot of content.
Yeah, and that's it. Once we have a schedule for no, it's not. Also, we have the podcast version, which we have also gotten caught up with ourselves in very broad strokes with.
Right.
Releasing like 10 episodes at a time. And then eventually, like, what was the last one that got us like absolutely caught up was like 18 or 20 episodes.
Yeah,
So
that was
for
all.
anybody who, if you, I think like the podcast episodes, I think we're at like episode 47 or 48, but on YouTube we
Yeah.
have over 50 episodes. So uh it's pretty crazy how much content we've generated in the past 5 months.
Well, we're just two dudes locked in a room. What else are we gonna do?
Right. So the podcast episodes are caught up. They're current with everything that we feel fit the audio format. Not everything is on there, so there's like bonus episodes or extra episodes on, or even like time sensitive episodes on YouTube.
Yeah. For example, we're not doing the Run for Laughs episode on the podcast because that, we hosted that the day before Run for Laughs, so it's no longer relevant.
Totally. But those episodes will be released on Tuesday and Friday. The Tuesday episodes, in theory, are going to be the audio recordings of our live episodes. So if you can't catch the live stream and you don't want to track it down on Facebook and YouTube, we should start getting caught up with those live audio episodes as well. And then Fridays is when we will release the video episodes that have been pre-recorded, and we'll release those on Facebook and YouTube as videos, and also the audio episode that matches the most current release every Friday. So still releasing a lot of content, but
yes. We should probably put up a chart or something because I know we're confused. I can imagine someone watching this like, wow. So every day there's something new? Pretty much. Pretty much.
It's right now until the lecture episode starting getting released and we throw that into the mix. Right now it is Sunday, 1 p.m. live stream, Tuesdays, podcast only releases of old live episodes, and then Fridays, the newest episode of pre-recorded video and podcast episodes. So hopefully that helps anybody who's just looking at what we're doing and being like, what the fuck is
I'll have Natalie make a chart. That seems to be easier.
Please.
Not Pete, because then we'll all get confused.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it for the housekeeping stuff. Let's get into our conversation for this episode. We're going to start with the concept of scene mapping. Once again, if you have questions related to the conversation as we go, feel free to chime in with them. If you have any questions about improv unrelated to scene mapping, also drop those in the comments, and we will talk about those in the second half of our recording today. Okay, scene mapping. Let's talk about it. Here's what the concept of scene mapping is. Taking elements of one scene or one idea, one event, and treating them as analogous to another scene. So it might be something like let's say from one scene to another, like that if you're lost in the woods trying to find your car and you get attacked by a bear, you might take that same idea and you might be lost in the corridors of a high school trying to find your homeroom, and you get attacked by the superintendent, like who sends you to detention.
But you would act as if the superintendent was as scary to you as the bear is to the guy being chased by the bear.
Yeah. So you can hit these elements. The other way you can do it is like kind of real life events, like mapping. It's used a lot in satire. So it might be something like using dating as analogous to shopping for a new car. And like spending time getting to know the car and like feeling around. What's it like to park with it? So it's
basically guy is to girl as other guy is to car.
Right. Yeah. It's the SAT question of improv.
I would say the easiest example of it, and a short form game we've all played, is when we've done something like Director's Choice, or where or anytime we are doing a scene and then we change the style of the scene. So, oh, you did this. I forgot. Oh, changing channels. So when you're playing something like changing channels, and now doing the style of a romantic comedy, or doing the style of take a romantic comedy and doing the style of horror. So you're using that kind of dialogue, that style that people are familiar with, and applying it to something that you usually wouldn't find in that style.
Right.
But you try to make the connections like character want, emotional reaction, status, and all those other elements, and just try to apply the one style onto the scene you're performing.
Yes, and here's the thing for me. Like, it's super useful. It's also like I think there's a spectrum of it. There's like because there's something as simple as like the idea of as if or as though, where you're like treat the idea of you ripped your jeans in a scene, or
right.
It came out damaged in the laundry, and treat that as though you just your dog just got run over,
right.
Treat it with the same motion, think about it in that way, and then just direct those emotions for one thing onto another thing. And that to me is like probably one of the most like basic or elemental kinds of scene mapping. It's just directing an emotion that makes sense in one scenario and then putting it onto a different scenario that doesn't make as much sense.
And I think that's one that people use just common in day-to-day conversation. Oh, did you see so-and-so? He was overreacting. He was acting as if blank happened.
Yes.
And it's a way to connect people and to show you the emotional weight, or the absurdity of the emotional weight that someone was experiencing when it was a smaller event. And that's usually what it is, taking something big and applying it to something small, and the contrast is where the comedy happens.
Yeah, so it's a nice comedic tool for juxtaposition.
Absolutely.
Or analogous comedy, and then it can also be interesting to make connections with, like, if you're doing a herald or a montage, and you have the opportunity to be like, I think you've brought this example up before, Bob, where like maybe if your show is working on thematics, and if you either get the suggestion of like breakups or like parting ways, or that kind of stuff just becomes the theme, then maybe you have like one scene in the show that's like a divorce between a couple, and then later in the show you take all the little details that happen in that scene and the beats of it, and then apply it to like a scene where you're getting fired, or then in the next part of the show you do like a duet, breaking up and doing solo projects. Then the way that becomes really clear to the audience and interesting and valuable to the show is that you kind of show the things that are the same and recognizable, relatable in each of those, and you just explore the idea of like, isn't it funny how consistent this feeling is, or this dynamic is
throughout your life,
situations, and exploring them through scene mapping is a really special way to do that.
And another thing that helps a lot is applying tropes from another genre, or whatever you're mapping onto your scene, and using them in unusual but applicable ways. So I really liked, like you said, the breaking up. If you're using the dialogue you would use when breaking up with somebody, but you're doing a scene about someone firing someone. What I like for that example is, and maybe in an everyday life, if your boss doesn't know you that well, us being humans, he might care, or she might care, they might care. But when you're applying an emotional breakup, like, then that boss really cares. Like, Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta let you go. It's not you. It's us. We have to downsize. We just, it's not like we don't care. We just can't.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get if we get bigger, we can bring you back sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be kind of interesting to use as a tool of like, wouldn't it be interesting if we did things differently? What if we had more empathy in a firing
Right.
situation, or what if we were more callous in breaking up with people?
Yeah.
Or it can be like we mentioned earlier. It can be about like pointing out like, well, these having heavier emotions in this situation makes sense. Yet we get really pissed off when our favorite football team loses. Like, how
Right.
silly is it? Which one is more serious, and yet we treat them with the same or like imbalanced stakes,
Yeah.
Matt says he doesn't have any questions, but he just wants to say your lighting makes him you ashen. But we're coming up on October, so
yeah, I'm an uncut jewel. I'm an uncut gem. I can turn it up. I got more lights.
I think it looks intense.
I got I
Um,
got so many lights, Wixom. I'll light this up.
So that's the tool, and one thing I want to talk about is just like how do you use it? Like when do you find yourself using it? Because I feel like there's not really. I feel like I've seen it done in heralds and montages, like and I would guess heralds that use this technique might do it a little bit more on purpose, of like instead of following a character from the first to second to third beat of a herald, and seeing them in different relationships or whatever, situations, you might just take the concept. If that was the most interesting thing in the first beat, one of the first scenes of a herald, is like the behavior in this situation, then you might just drop those characters and the situation and just take the dynamics of that event and explore it in the second beat. So I've seen that before.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen like kind of coincidentally, or just like present itself in a montage. But like, are there particular times when you have made a point to do scene mapping, Bob?
Yes, when if we're doing something like we're trying to make connections or establish patterns, I'll try to either try to scene map the relationship from the previous scene if it's all being connected. Like when we're doing secrets was a really great time to do something like that, because we have this weird family dynamic. So if someone playing my older brother and is rude to me, but I'm nice to them, maybe I'm rude to my younger brother and he's nice to me. It's just trying to establish like that's a pattern, or or just if something comes up, and I guess most of the time it happens organically. If I notice that I'm doing a trope, and I just want to just start applying more of those tropes from that world onto whatever scene I'm doing, I think that's the most common version I do. Or I think the scene that we did in Javelin when we were playing, when we opened for those kids, and we were talking about like when I want to talk about something inappropriate, but use appropriate terminology and apply it to that situation. I think that
those kids.
Yeah, we were not well. They're kids to me. They were like 20. Socially awkward. We were doing I think maybe as a bits tournament or something. I can't remember. And we did a really
we were competing, and you just called it opening for those kids.
Opening for those.
No, I think you're right. I think
And then I think we had like a whole safe sex discussion, but we didn't mention sex. We didn't, because their families and stuff were out in the audience. But everybody knew what we're talking about. It's very much like the Seinfeld, like master of their own domain.
Yes.
I love those moments. Seinfeld does a lot of mapping because they want to talk about, in that version of mapping, the satire, like this is to this, as this is to this. So yeah, let's have a contest who can hold out longer and be the master of the domain without,
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. That kind of gets back to the spectrum, and I definitely want to talk about it because I want to kind of like pick apart what types of scene mapping and I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. So just to be a little bit more, use a practical example of what I think of when I think of scene mapping. Like specifically, I usually think of what you said is like the motifs in the genre and whatnot. And we had in a we were doing a I almost said dark matter. Name this show. Excuse me. We did a name this show, and it was a big cast, and we had this crazy scene. Two people were sitting on stage in stage chairs, and it was like a beat before anybody said anything, and somebody did the like Western whistle of like
nailed it,
and tumbleweed thing.
Yeah.
And then it became and then somebody came on and was like a saloon waitress and delivered drinks, and then the two guys were playing poker, and then there was a shootout, and then somebody like the janitor came through and was like cleaning up the mess of broken bottles. Somebody came out of a sewer grate or something, or like a trap door hatch up and said something, and then the duel. Somebody got shot, and then we took that to an ambulance, and I remember me and Joe Hingelberg, he was driving the ambulance, and I was in the back trying to stitch up patch up the patient, bandage up the patient, get them to the hospital. And then a few scenes went by, and then somebody same sort of thing happened where two people were sitting on stage, and one person, the only difference was that one person was smoking a cigarette as their starting stance, but they hadn't said anything, and somebody did that whistle again. And then whoever was smoking a cigarette, I'm pretty sure, was the one that turned it into a French thing. So they were like, so then everybody had a French accent. The waitress came on and was delivering French drinks, and same scene, just with French accent. And then I think we turned the whistle into like like, and then it ended with like Joe in the ambulance, me and Joe back in the ambulance, and Joe goes, "Le wee wee."
That's
but
awesome.
so we took the same scene and made it French, right? So we used scene mapping to play around with genre.
Yes.
And that's not always the case, but like kind of hitting the same beats with this new twist. That's what I think of when I think of scene mapping and long form improv.
Yeah. Well, I've also seen the version where in a Herald, it's scene A, they do the scene A, and then scene B, they come out and do the same object work as scene A, but different location, different characters, different scene, but they're using the landscape as the same. Then scene C, same thing. Totally the same layout, but like in scene A, this might be a computer. Scene B, this might be someone massaging a cat. Scene C, this might be someone doing a spell. Basically playing with the entire room that they created.
Yeah. So we got a question from Sue here. Hi,
Sue.
Tuning in.
Sue, so good to see you.
So Sue says this technique seems to identify common patterns in human relations and then throwing in juxtaposition and absurdity. Is part of the appeal giving the audience the satisfaction of seeing patterns. And yeah, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, I think that you like, what is the commentary about those patterns will change. Like, again, for us, we didn't really make a commentary about like what it's like to get into a duel in some restaurant when you're French or in an old Western. We're really just playing with genre. And so really the patterns that you're seeing is just like motifs and tropes in genre and blending them together. Other times it's going to be about commentary on human behavior. And I think at its best, scene mapping is about pointing to the inescapable habits of being human, or the hypocrisies, like you said, Bob, of having the same relationship in one situation and then turning around, and even though you don't like the dynamic in your one type of relationship, flipping it and doing the same thing, or changing it, like learning from it. Those are definitely the best kinds of commentary that come from scene mapping. The one thing I'll say about it is that I think rarely do, as an improviser, do you or should you think ahead of time about the exact takeaway or message you're trying to send.
You should discover that 100%. I'm sorry, I stepped on your last line. I was like, I agree. I know where you're going, and I completely fucking agree. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah.
So I think even though those are the takeaways, as Sue points out, I think that what's interesting about it, as a lot of improv tools are, is that like you just kind of explore it because it's interesting, and then there's something in the patterns that, like, after the fact, you can kind of look at and be like, man, what was that about? Or why was that so interesting? Or like, why was it fun to chase that down? And what was it that really hit?
And another element that we kind of brushed upon, it makes the scene relatable. And I think that's what's, and using elements that people can relate to or people are familiar with. I think that's what patterns are so gratifying. Is like, oh, I'm familiar with this thing already. I feel at ease. It breaks the tension just a little bit because they're already a little bit more on board than they were a couple of seconds ago because, oh, we've kind of already seen this, or this is something in my life I can connect to. And I think we talked about this in the Fuck World episode, but I call it my Pixar theory. Like if you're gonna create this big, elaborate, crazy, awesome world, you have to map something onto it that's relatable, that kind of puts it into that dips a toe into reality, that makes it that allows the audience to connect to the story in some sort of way. And you'll see that like Pixar, if you take Toy Story, the concept of living toys is crazy and big and it's fun, but they have real human emotions and real relationships, and they have jealousy and stuff that we can relate to, even if we want to deny it. Like that's a basic human trait. They all have them in some form, but they're adjusted to fit into what the reality of a toy would be.
Yeah. Especially the potato head situation. I think
the potato head situation. I want to start a trip with you. It's called the potato head situation.
Well, I don't know. Just being like, okay, what is it like to have human emotions for a Mr. Potato Head, and then being like, oh well, he's got to
physically move parts of his body to let the world know how he feels.
Yes, exactly.
I kind of would like that. Like if that was something we had to do as humans to show, like, because then there wouldn't be like any BS. Like, I'm mad because I'm taking the time to show you my mad face. Yeah, that's a line you had to cross.
Yeah, you did it on purpose. It's like,
I'd get in a lot more auto accidents because I've been just, where's my pissed off face?
Yeah. Where's the arm that has the middle finger on it? Yeah. Okay, so this is my question for just kind of like consideration, because again, I think scene mapping has a spectrum. I think that the more details and checkpoints you hit about a scene, the more, to me, it's called scene mapping, because it's like that's what the map is, right? You have these landmarks, these recognizable features, and you're kind of like taking the blueprint of that and placing it onto a different backdrop.
Right.
So but I still think like there's little tiny things that we're talking about that are kind of like mapping or analogous that are still in scene mapping. And
Yeah.
my more general question is like, it's like the ship thought experiment where you're like, if you have a ship and you have to replace like a couple floorboards, and then you have to replace the mast, and then you have to replace the cabin, and it's like, how much can you replace about the ship and have it still be the same ship? When is it a new ship, right?
Yeah.
So like what do you think about, like, I don't know, how much do you have to change about the scene to play around with it versus, or how much do you have to keep the same to even see the connection? You know what I mean? Like if
Right.
I'm an audience, you might be scene mapping in your head, but if it's not clear to the audience, it's losing its
Yeah.
the point of it, right? So like, how much do you have to keep the same in order to make it clear that you are scene mapping?
Well, do you have to make it clear that you're scene mapping? Because it might just be a tool for you to make decisions as to what your character does. It doesn't necessarily mean have to be a tool for presentation. But yeah,
I guess that's what I'm proposing, is that maybe that is a good way to like have the two sides of it, is that like there's the internal scene mapping
right.
that's helpful as an actor and a comedian
Yes.
to kind of like play with the world, but then there's the external scene mapping of everybody seeing that you are making a translation from one scene into the next.
Sorry, I just read Matt Wixom's comment. Well played, sir.
The improv talk one.
Yeah.
Matt comes for the improv talk and stays for the Ship of Theseus philosophical thought experiment. And thank you if yeah, I didn't know what the name of that was. So Ship of Theseus. Thank you for the naming it, Matt. And then Sue also has a question, another question or comment here. She says, it seems similar to when you play a huge, mean, angry villain, there has to be some vulnerability to anchor that character and allow empathy.
Yeah, they talk about that in Save the Cat. Almost every villain has a pet or a prized possession or a family member or something. Some kind of, you have to be vulnerable to be relatable. You know, like Thanos, he cares so much that he's doing the wrong thing. That's why he's an interesting character, because he doesn't know he's doing wrong. He thinks he's doing what's best for everybody, and that as soon as he does the snap, you know, that's why he stops after the snap. He's like, "Hey, I did what I had to do. You're welcome."
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with like villains needing vulnerability and a flaw to allow empathy or three-dimensional character. Right. Okay, and here's the example is that like, if you are what is Thanos's weakness? Like, what are we calling his weakness here?
His poor unusual philosophy, I guess. Like he thinks he's doing the right thing, I guess, would be his flaw. Like if you also could say his love for Gamora, you know, but yeah, he happens to have to kill her after end. So like, yeah, no
spoiler.
I mean, at the end of the day, like, he's not just doing it to do it. So his character has a lot more depth, because I mean, not that
vulnerability is he does care. We see that he does care, and feels that he has to do what he needs to do.
Absolutely. And I mean, there can be an argument meant like there in some messed up, warped way, you know, he has a point, you know, and but it's a heightening of a basic concept of, as a parent, sometimes you have to do something that your kids don't like, but you know it's in their best interest, and they might be mad at you for it, but you're going to have to do it anyways because you care.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, okay, so we have examples there of like
Right.
if you were if you find yourself playing a character in improv and you're like, man, I just seem really dark
Right.
and evil, then you might think to a character like Thanos and be oh, okay, I'm going to use that model. Excuse the New York sirens in the background if you can hear those. Um, I'm going to use that Thanos model and be like, okay, I'm pretty cold and calculated, but I care.
Right.
About the consequences of what I'm doing. I just feel like I need to have to do it nonetheless. So you can apply that to your character, or as you gave as a second example, the parenting thing of like, it's you know, it's what's best for you, and even though it doesn't um make you happy, you feel like it's unfair or unjust. You have to push through your decision to do what you're doing because you believe it's best for things. That
Yeah.
to me, that is internal scene mapping, or internal mapping, internal analogous, and internal as if, um using that as an acting tool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that those that's how it can be applied,
Yeah.
if you're looking to use it, to kind of as a quick reference point, um to accomplish certain goals in the way you're doing characters or the way you're playing scenes. Um, Now the scene mapping though, that's where I really enjoy or sorry, the external scene mapping. That's where I really enjoy playing with this kind of stuff. Um, because sometimes you just get the opportunity to kind of play with the same situation over again, or
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember one time Pete and I were doing a duo set, and we just happened to start one scene. I was standing, and he was sitting with his legs crossed or something, and it became like a um I can't remember what the scene was, but maybe it was like a police chief and a detective thing, and uh and then we did the scene, and then later in the in the show, we just seemed to start in those same positions but reverse. The opposite person was sitting with their legs crossed and the other person was standing, and we didn't do any clever scene mapping. We just repeated the same scene playing each other's roles.
Right.
And that was fun to me, but I don't know if I would call that scene mapping, because again, like the ship of Theseus, like it's just the same ship, like, or like, you know what I mean? Like how much of it are we really playing around with?
Right.
It's like a new paint job to the same ship, or like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You just took all the parts of the ship and reversed them, and now it's just the same ship pointed the other direction. Like, how much are we really changing?
Yeah. You're just driving in reverse. Yeah.
Yeah. But so somewhere between those two things, where it's like,
Yeah.
I think that's where really the sweet spot is of getting the most out of scene mapping. Is like, it's a nice little tool to use internally, if you are looking for acting tools,
Yeah.
and comedy tools. And then on the other side, it's like, we're not really just trying to repeat things for the sake of repeating things.
Right.
Somewhere in between is like, you kept enough about it to make it recognizable, but you changed enough to use it as a comment on something else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I do think the external version is my favorite as well. Uh, I think this is a great choice. We talk about make big bold choices, and our job is to show a slice of life that people don't usually get to see. So if you ever find yourself stuck in a scene that does feel a little too familiar with you, a way to make it unfamiliar, relatable, but different, is to take elements from a different style or a different, or a different relationship, and apply it to the norm. Because that's where the comedy comes from, just showing something unusual, and that's what makes it more interesting. So that's my
Yeah.
approach. I do enjoy doing that kind of the external mapping.
Yeah. And we've talked about on here before just how important juxtaposition is to comedy, because it's a question of like, how do you keep things in the realm of comedy? Mapping and juxtaposition is one of those great tools for as a comedic device, because it having extraordinary characters in ordinary situations, or ordinary characters in extraordinary situations,
yeah,
is one nice consistent way to create comedy. Just flip the expectations of what's going on. And the same thing goes with like, not just like, ordinary and extraordinary characters and situations, but like you said, doing everything in a genre that makes sense except for like these one or two things, or doing everything normal except applying these one or two bits of genre. So you kind of have these like accent points,
right.
To
And treating them as if they're normal. If you treat them as if they're part of the world, it's unnormal for the audience, but it's normal for the character. That's fun too.
Yeah, we used to do in the troupe Legend Has It, which was improvised folk and fairy tales. We used to have conversations about like, what kind of suggestions should we be getting to make sure that we stay in the realm of fairy tale. And we had some answers to that for ourselves, but the most useful answer that we came up with was like, well, let's just make sure that whatever the suggestion is that we take, or the elements that we introduce, that we treat them the way that you would treat them, the way that things in a fairy tale are treated. So if it's an iPad, it's the golden iPad of youth.
Mm-hmm. The magic tablet that reaches all over the web of the world.
And again, so that's kind of where you can like use scene mapping or analogous tools to be like, oh, an iPad is like the mirror on the wall. It's like you're looking at whatever, like social media for answers, self-comparison or whatever. That can, those can be really nice comedic tools. Okay, what else about scene work, or sorry, scene mapping? Were there other elements that you wanted to touch on, Bob?
Well, I did like we talked about, I forgot what the term is, but when we were talking about using your environment and mapping those out, and then applying different relationships within that environment. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like I talked about A, B, and C having the same environment, but just in general, like again, thinking about the elements you can change in the scene, whether it's your emotion, your relationship, your location. I think talking about the environmental work and how that can be fun would be interesting as well.
Yeah. That's something that I've always thought of as, or the name that I use for it is landmarking.
There it is. Yeah. Ooh.
And
table. Whoa.
Whoa. Did you have your phone almost fall?
No, I hit the table when I grabbed my water, or was grabbing for water.
Yeah. Landmarking just rocked your world.
Mm-hmm. Marking.
So landmarking to me, usually it's a tool of returning to scenes to like continue them, and it's like you can use it as like staging or activities. Once you return to distinct stagings and physicalities, it is a landmark to recognize the return of a scene or a character. But I think it's a great point that like that can also be used as a scene mapping tool of like, oh man,
I was just listening to so you've heard about how popular The Office is now, as far as like it's grown more. It was popular when it was on the air, but it's grown even more popular since it's been streaming, like to the point where I think Netflix got really kicked in the ass when they took it back and put it on Peacock, and all these other things are going on. Like there was a big bidding war for it, and they said like when it was on the air, it was somewhat of a college show, but it was people who actually worked at an office really got a kick out of it because it was something familiar with him. Oh, I work in an office. This takes place in the office. This is a heightened version of the hijinks and the bullshit that I have to deal with. Whoa. But now, like, the age demographic who are watching it currently are way younger. Like, we're talking early teens. And that's mostly to do because the situations that happen in office also can be relatable to people who are stuck going to school. You're stuck going to a location where you have to do, work on a computer or whatever. You have someone who is you're subordinate to who may or may not be fair, or like Michael Scott could be a great, if you took the same characteristics and put it into a teacher, it would be a very entertaining teacher, someone who wants to be respected, powerful, but also loved.
Yeah. Excuse me. Any situation where you're just like waiting out the clock.
Yeah.
And trying to kill time.
Can't wait for the weekend,
Yeah, relatable to The Office.
Hate when you get stuck working with somebody who's gross in the class, whatever,
Yeah. Well, and so let's hop back over to the landmarking conversation real quick, because I think that you can use that for like transformative edits too, where like if you have I mean, I'm trying to think of some specific Javelin situations where we were using physical landmarking or transformations, but like
I believe in our last set we were doing we initiated with, because the suggestion was photosynthesis, and we started off as plants. So I think there was transitions between scenes. We came back to the plants who were growing, and like, I don't know. It's hard to explain like a Javelin set. Like, we were doing something, but we were plants, but we knew in a specific order, and
okay. So I'll use this example just because I can think of it more clearly for the
Thank you.
But so I did a set with Eric and Tim. The three of us did a Presto Changeo set where we had we brought a bunch of like tables and chairs onto the stage, and we kind of piled them in the middle, and I think we were like rioting in the scene or something, and we just kept like playing around with the fact that we had these permanent things on stage. You can't just sweep that. You could,
but it doesn't just disappear because you have to strike them all.
Yeah. So the reason this is kind of a wonky example is because it's not about something we did. It's about something that I wish we had done after the fact, because we put ourselves in a position of having these heavy items, physical items, obstructing the center of the stage. And I did not edit because I was like, fuck, we can't just sweep. These chairs and tables aren't going to magically disappear when we sweep at it. So I got stuck feeling like we had to ride out the scene, which was fine. But like after the fact, I wish that we had gone from like that into like a barricade situation, or like a bonfire, or like being on
Burning Man,
or climbing a mountain. It's like you can use the physical qualities of the scene or the staging, or the physical stage that you're on, to make these pivots from scene to scene. And whether or not that makes commentary on it is like for you to think about after the fact. And since we didn't do it, I don't have a story of how it turned out, but I can just imagine that like if it's rioting and then it's barricading, that like you would after the fact be like, oh, it's interesting because it's about rebellion, or putting up walls between you and other people, or whatever, you know what I mean? You might be able to come up with things that are interesting about that, and it would have had more to do with the use of physical staging than the content of the scenes.
Right. Yeah. And then this is like, what else can we do with it? It becomes a whole game, you know?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Totally, dude. Okay, well, I think that that covers all the points of interest to me in scene mapping that I can think of. So let's friggin' wrap this bad boy up.
Sounds good, man.
Once again, you can check us out on, if you're watching this live stream, it's either on YouTube or Facebook. But you can also find us now starting tomorrow. We will have content available on even Instagram. And those will be the lecture episodes. We have more of those coming out soon, so stay tuned. Make sure you're liking, following, subscribing to everything Improv FAQ. And we will be doing these live streams every Sunday at 1 p.m. So join us to chime in with questions on the conversation. Thanks to Sue and Matt for chiming in. We appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time on Improv FAQ at length.
Bye.